I got a comment on the channel the other day, and I've seen variations on this idea a million times online over the years. And the comment was this: Brazilian Jiu Jitsu doesn't work in a real fight. Okay, I guess we have today's topic. Let's talk about it. I'm thrilled to announce that my new Jiu Jitsu course is finally out. It's called Old Guy Cheat Code. Although I'm marketing it to the over 40 grappler, it's really appropriate to anybody that doesn't feel they have the physical attributes to be competitive. Maybe you're a little smaller, a little weaker, maybe you have some physical limitations. This course is really an exploration of my game and how I like to approach the game of Jiu Jitsu as an older athlete, starting with survival. Can you survive bad positions? And can you thrive from bad positions? I'll teach you what I like to do to get out of side control, get out from mount, get out from a variety of disadvantaged positions. And then once I get to the top, how do I like to increment myself to a dominant position? I spend a long time talking about all the submissions that I like to hit from there. In addition to my content on this course, I have two amazing guest instructors that have contributed modules. The first is Mr. Roy Dean. He was kind enough to give me another module. He gave me a module in my last course and he's done it again. This time the focus is on what to do after you've gotten your guard passed. Guard retention can be a very complex and difficult subject. Roy Dean demystifies what he likes to do to get himself into an advantageous position even though someone has passed his guard. Also on this course is my good friend Chris Mikuta. Chris is an amazing judo black belt, jiu-jitsu black belt, and he's someone that has modified his judo to be much more applicable to the jiu-jitsu game. And he's a little older, he's not as dynamic as he used to be, but yet his takedown game is spectacular, and he shares some great knowledge and information on how to do takedowns in a way that are safe and effective as you get older. I also have a lot of bonus content. This course has over 4 hours of material. There's a lot of content. I've pulled in some extra stuff from here and there, and I'm making it all available on this one course. If you'd like to get it, just visit rickellis.com, and thank you so much for your support. Jiu-jitsu doesn't work in a real fight. When I hear a statement like that, the first question I have is this: what's a real fight? What's a real fight? If you're a carpenter and you say a chisel doesn't work in a real woodworking project, well, you have to ask the question, what is a real woodworking project? Because the truth is, a chisel might be the correct tool or it might not be the correct tool. So what's a real fight? Is it a situation in a bar where you step on someone's foot, they shove you, now they're in your face? Or you're at the bar, you start chatting up a woman, you don't realize she's there with her boyfriend, he comes walking over with a couple drinks, next thing you know, he's in your face. Is that a real fight? Or is a real fight a situation, you're at the airport counter and a sketchy guy comes, agitated, starts causing trouble? Is that a real fight? What about a robbery situation? Someone pulls a knife on you and says, give me your wallet. Is that a real fight? What about a road rage incident? You accidentally cut someone off, they follow you, you stop at a red light, they jump out of their car with a baseball bat. Is that a real fight? Is a carjacking a real fight? Is a home invasion robbery a real fight? Is an active shooter situation a real fight? You're at the mall, you hear gunshots. Is that a real fight? Well, I would say yes to all those things. I think all of those things have the potential to become physical altercations or scenarios where you're fighting for your life in some way. You have to take some action to avoid something bad that happens. And so the question is jiu-jitsu appropriate in any of those scenarios, or a dozen other scenarios that you could probably think of, or hundreds of scenarios that we could probably come up with? Is jiu-jitsu the appropriate response for any of that stuff? And I think it's self-evident. Yes, yes, jiu-jitsu is going to be appropriate for many, many scenarios. Is it the correct response for every scenario? Is kickboxing the correct response for every scenario? Of course not. Is a gun the correct response for every scenario? Of course not, right? A martial art is just a tool. It's just a set of tools. And self-defense can mean many, many things, including verbal jiu-jitsu, the guy that steps on your foot at the bar, or the guy who you stepped on his foot at the bar and he shoves you, he's in your face. The first line of defense is verbal jiu-jitsu. Hey man, I am so sorry. By the way, I love your shirt, man. Hey, can I buy you a drink? Right? And you just diffuse a situation that could have gotten ugly versus letting your ego get out of control. What are you talking about, man? I didn't mean to. And now you're fighting. So the intelligent person, the intelligent martial artist, the intelligent, person who thinks about the subject of self-defense is certainly going to acknowledge the fact that there are a range of things that could happen, and the response has to be appropriate for that thing. You're walking to your car late at night, some guy's trying to break into your car. What is the appropriate reaction? Is it to confront? Is it to detach? Right? The decision you make in that moment is going to determine how things unfold. And if you don't have a choice and you have to use your martial art, well, that's part of it too. So to say that jiu-jitsu doesn't work it's just binary thinking. I hate binary thinkers, people that are too black and white, people that are, it's brittle thinking. This is what a real fight is, and only kickboxing works for that. All these other scenarios, those aren't a real fight. It doesn't work for that. Life is way more nuanced than that. And the truth is, everything can work. Now, here's the question. Is there empirical data to support the idea that jiu-jitsu could work in a self-defense situation? Well, yes, there is. There's a lot of data out there. One of them, a friend of mine, Lewis Martin, who I've mentioned on this channel before, he's an author and a martial artist. He wrote an article for a martial arts magazine a few years ago. I couldn't find it. I went looking for it, unfortunately, so I'm going by memory here, but he watched 100 fights on YouTube. Now, the disclaimer is he wasn't watching truly violent encounters where someone died, right? YouTube wouldn't allow that content. So he watched fights that tended to be one-on-one, or if there was a group of people, it would be two people that would emerge from the group and fight. And here was his findings when he did that. He found that 7 out of 10 times, 70% of the time, fights went to the ground. Right? We always hear that in jiu-jitsu. Most fights go to the ground. Well, certainly in these 100 fights that Lewis watched, 7 out of 10 times the fights went to the ground. Once the fights were on the ground, they never stood back up again. If there were attempts to stand up, the person would get dragged down. Once they were on the ground, they stayed on the ground 7 out of 10 times. Would jiu-jitsu be useful in that scenario? Would wrestling be useful in that scenario? Of course, 100%. Would kickboxing be useful in that scenario? No. You could take a world-class kickboxer against a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. If the blue belt can close the distance and clinch up, the kickboxer is going to have nothing. Now, 30% of the time, the fight stayed on their feet. And there were knockouts, right? There were never knockouts on the ground. That's one thing that he noticed. If a fight goes to the ground, there was never a knockout on the ground. If the fight stayed on the feet, occasionally there were knockouts in a small minority of the fights, but only within the first 10 seconds. If there wasn't a knockout within the first 10 seconds, there wasn't a knockout at all. Now, I attribute that to the fact that most fights tend to be ego-driven, and you get two guys nose to nose, chest to chest, one guy cold cocks the other guy, and there's a knockout. But if they disengage and now there's some hands being thrown, if there isn't a knockout, it's not going to happen. So interesting data. Based on that, yeah, Jiu Jitsu is a great martial art for 70% of the things, 70% of the times when it's going to be a one-on-one situation, no knives, guns, etc. So you can't say Jiu Jitsu doesn't work in a real fight. And here's the thing. I think that Jiu Jitsu is immensely valuable, not only for a self-defense situation, but because it gives you a level of fitness that is incredibly valuable. Mark Ripito has a great saying. He's a strength coach. I love this quote by him. He says, "Strong people are harder to kill than weak people, and they're more useful in general." I love that. And it's true. It is true. You can't underestimate the role of fitness when it comes to a self-defense situation. I know guys that carry guns and they have a beer belly. They look like they haven't done a push-up in 20 years. And they say, "I don't need to train martial arts. I carry a gun." Great. The gun is a wonderful tool, but it's not the right tool for every situation. And if you pull out a gun in the wrong situation, or even if you use a gun in self-defense, right? Your life as you know it is over. You're going to get run through the legal system. You might end up in jail on manslaughter charges. Every approach to self-defense has some downsides. You're a kickboxer. You think that's the end-all, be-all of martial arts, punching and kicking. Great. You punch some guy, he slams his head on the ground, now he's got a brain bleed, next thing you know he goes into a coma, and then he dies. Your life as you know it just ended. You're probably going to be charged with manslaughter. You're going to be sued into oblivion. And that's one of the issues with striking arts or using a gun or a knife, is that you can't scale the response. That's one of the advantages of Jiu Jitsu, is that it's scalable. I can take someone to the ground and control them for their own safety and my safety very gently. I just make it to where they can't move. Or I can scale up the response. I can rain down elbows, I can gouge his eyes out, I can choke him, I can snap a limb, right? We can scale that response in Jiu Jitsu, and that is immensely powerful, immensely valuable. You see this with police officers all the time. Officers that are poorly trained when it comes to hand-to-hand situations. They know how to cuff, they know how to do certain things, but they're not skilled on the ground. What happens? Go watch videos. The response is way up here. They will get super adrenalized, and then the response will be incredibly severe. They'll go 100%, right? When a good Jiu Jitsu practitioner would be able to handle that situation much more gently, right? So I think Jiu Jitsu, personally, if you're only going to train one martial art, in my mind, Jiu Jitsu is the best art, because it's going to let you scale the response. It's going to give you a very high level of fitness. It's going to give you the ability to deal with situations that are, body to body, hand to hand, in ways that you're going to be woefully unprepared if you're just a striker. Is Jiu Jitsu perfect? No. Some people criticize Jiu Jitsu because they say, well, how you train is how you fight. And if you're a guard player, if you're used to pulling guard, you're going to pull guard in a you're going to revert to how you train. You're going to pull guard in a self-defense situation, and you're going to get your ass handed to you. Well, maybe. But if you have a couple functioning brain cells and you're smart and you've given any thought to this sort of thing, and you have some kind of strategic idea of what you should do in a self-defense situation, well, you're not going to revert to how you train. If I spend probably more time on the bottom than I do on the top. I'm old, I'm slow, people pass my guard, I have to work from the bottom, get to the top, and then be dominant. Does that mean that in a self-defense situation, I'm going to revert to that and just pull guard and get my side control structure going? No, of course not. I'm going to be mindful of the fact that I have to stay on top. If there's cement, I don't want to be on the bottom. I don't want to shoot a double leg and slam my knee on the ground. I'm going to probably arm drag, try to take the back. I mean, there's strategy involved. There's always strategy involved in these things. And so to say jiu-jitsu doesn't work because, you're going to end up on your back and then you're going to be in trouble. Well, maybe it's forced on you. Maybe you get, forced in a situation where you have to be on your back, well, you better know how to fight off your back. People say, oh, you can't use a berimbolo in a self-defense situation. Everything is context dependent. Everything is context dependent. If there's an opening to take the back and you're on your back and you're great at the berimbolo, great, take the back. All right. So what I'm suggesting here is that we apply our martial art intelligently. You select a martial art that spars. It can be striking, it can be grappling. I choose grappling for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the fact that I'm old and I can train at 100% intensity in a way that I can't train kickboxing. I don't want to get punched in the face at my age. So I train Jiu Jitsu. And it's going to give me attribute development. It's going to give me the ability to be calm under pressure. It's going to give me a ton of capability that's going to come to bear even if I never have to use my jiu-jitsu directly. If jiu-jitsu doesn't appeal to you, select a martial art that appeals to you. Just make sure it's one that spars. And that's it. All we can do is prepare sufficiently. In an ideal world, you would train everything. You would train every range of combat from, guns at distance to close quarter. That's not realistic for most of us. We have to select one thing. We've got families, we've got obligations, we don't have unlimited time. So pick a martial art and do it. And don't disparage other martial arts because it's not the choice that you made. And that's it. And then develop a strategic game plan, develop an idea of what you should be doing to keep yourself safe. De-escalate, flee. There's no upside to getting into an altercation if you can avoid it. So those are my thoughts on the matter. I could say more about it, but I'm really curious to hear from you guys below. What are your thoughts on the subject of self-defense and martial arts for self-defense and so on? And I appreciate you watching, and we'll talk next time.